Hi, and welcome to CMO Journeys. I'm Christian Banach, and on the show, I talk with the marketing leaders behind some of today's most interesting brands. We get into their career paths, how to think about marketing, and how they work with agencies. Barack Ferrazzano is a Chicago-based general practice law firm advising businesses, entrepreneurs, investors, and financial institutions on complex legal matters. Today's guest is Sivan Galinsky, and she brings a rare operator's view of legal marketing with a career that has moved through legal recruitment, client relations, business development, proposals, and now the CMO seat. Sivan, welcome to CMO Journeys.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to have a conversation about my career.
Absolutely. So I know now you're living in the Chicago area, but tell us a little bit about where did you grow up? Were you in the Chicago area? Did you grow up someplace else? What kind of kid were you growing up?
I grew up in the Skokie North Shore suburb area. So I like to say I never left except for my brief stint at University of Wisconsin. I have, immigrant parents, so definitely sort of the first child in the U.S. Growing up along with my parents, I would say. That's a pretty typical situation for folks who come from a different country and have their first kid here. My parents like to say I always wanted to be a lawyer from a very young age. They kind of knew that and always assumed that would be the case. They were right. I did sort of leave college. Actually, had done a double major at UW to sort of study legal studies and poli sci. They were one of the only colleges in the country that had a legal studies major back in the early 2000s. So I kind of always wanted to be a lawyer. So growing up, I would assume that meant I was argumentative and pretty headstrong as a young child and all the way through college and probably beyond. I don't know where they decided that was the case, but they were right about what I wanted to do with my life. And funny enough, when I got out of college, I ended up not becoming a lawyer, even though I worked at law firms sort of through college, out of college, and really have been there for 20 years.
Yeah. So what was it that made you decide not to move forward with becoming a lawyer?
So I graduated UW in '05, so '06 was really the first year I kind of jumped into the workforce. And as everyone knows, that was right before the big 2008 crash. I started working at a 35 attorney commercial real estate firm in Chicago. Again, just thinking I'll study for the LSAT, I'll work at a firm, I'll get a sense for what it's like before I dive into this, huge decision. And we were hiring, Northwestern and UFC grads at the 35 attorney firm at the time already in like early 2007. So people could kind of sense that, a crash or a slowdown was coming. So that was one factor, right? I would have had to entirely take out student loans to go to law school. And so obviously, if I was going to do that, it was going to be a big commitment. And, worked at this firm, and every lawyer I worked with said, don't go to law school. And I thought, what? Are you nuts? You're ruining my life. What does that mean? I think at the time I didn't know that law firm management in any way, shape, or form was sort of a career. I sort of thought, lawyers are run or law firms are run by lawyers. There was one or two people that were in management at my smaller firm, but I kind of thought you're either a lawyer or you're not a lawyer. Little did I know there was this whole world really being established at that point of sort of running law firms as a business. And, when lawyers said you don't want to go to law school, and I think the term was you're too social. You don't want to look at contracts all day. You're too much of a people person. I thought you guys were all people, right? Like I had no idea back then. And so between sort of the economic slowdown and then obviously sort of this don't go to law school mentality, I ended up just staying there and working to kind of decide what I wanted to do, and was lucky enough to be sort of taken under the wing of their COO, who was this dynamic woman who sort of had done everything on the management side. And she kind of, threw me into the fire of everything that sort of goes into running a law firm. And that was really the spark through like, wow, I don't have to be a lawyer. I could go on the business side of firms and really have a pretty established career path doing, all of those things or even some of those things. So that's kind of how it all started.
Yeah. So I believe, one of your first roles was in legal recruitment and then,
Mhm.
some client relations before you ultimately, started working more in marketing and biz dev.
Mhm.
What did, that early chapter maybe teach you about how law firms actually work?
So it was fascinating. I got thrown into everything. I ended up doing all their legal recruitment, all their client events, redoing and managing their website, pitches, proposals. I was pulled into the finance department when I told them I hated math. Like with a passion and wasn't going to do numbers. Oh, the computer will do that all for you, right? So I did billing. I was asked to run their collections program because they didn't need someone who was going to crunch the numbers, but they needed someone who could talk to clients and sort of get to their, to their issues and level. So I would say I had a very unique 360-degree like view of a law firm and running a law firm behind the scenes. And that was really an inside scoop towards what motivates lawyers, right? How do lawyers get paid? How does the firm subsist? Right? What are expenses and overhead look like? How does that impact lawyers' comp? Like all the things that sort of behind the scenes tell you what motivates attorneys, right? And so I think that's a pretty unique background. It's sort of unique for someone to get that opportunity. So I sort of ate it up. I was there for 7 years and I sort of was a jack of all trades, a master of absolutely nothing. But it was an incredible experience. And so I would say that was also at a transformative time in law firms. So at law firms then, like I said, it was, a handful of people would be running the firm that were management people, but really lawyers thought they ran the firm still back then. We're talking 2006, 2008. And when the crash happened, to sort of live through that, I mean, was extraordinary. I was lucky enough to still have a job, let alone, kind of see, layoffs and, having to crunch and get tight on the numbers and like really look at everything we were spending both in and out and, rates and fee proposals and things for clients. That's the first time clients started to ask for discounts or accommodations or things because everyone was sort of feeling that crash. So it was pretty invaluable experience into understanding the industry, the different aspects of the industry, the different sort of lawyers and sort of what motivates them, and also sort of our clients and the challenges our clients were having and how do we weather our storm along theirs, right? Because when your clients are struggling as a law firm, you're going to struggle. There's kind of they're very much connected to each other. So I thought, it was an invaluable experience to get all sides of the house under my belt at that point.
Yeah. And obviously, most CMOs, probably come up through more of a brand, advertising, or kind of communications background.
Right.
You, as you've just described, came in a very different angle. And I'm curious, how do you think that really shaped how you're leading marketing today?
I think it was crucial. And again, like I said, it was unique, right? It's not necessarily expected. I think even in my current role, I came in as their first CMO. They sort of took a chance on me, right? They were looking to backfill a director that had left running the department. And I think they recognized the firm was at a time where leadership changes were coming and things because of retirements or, and especially founding partners and things like that. Sort of giving way and giving room to the future leadership of the firm to start taking over early, right? That was happening. And I think they recognized, when I sort of fell in their lap a little bit, that maybe we do need a CMO. Maybe we would benefit from someone a little bit more senior who's done this before, right? I think I walked in with way more of a broad lens than a CMO. I think I walked in with here's how what I do and here's how what we do as a department is going to impact sort of everything else. And here's how everything else that happens at the firm impacts our department and what we need to do for the firm. I don't think that's a typical lens. If, I started out in marketing and I ended up in marketing, right? And I sort of only had that side of the experience wheel. I don't think I would be coming in and saying, well, we need to do this on operations. We need to do this from here. We need to do this from there, right? We need to do this for training. You can't just hire folks and not develop them, right? What makes us better or different than Big Law? Like, why would Big Law associates come here and want to stay here for their careers, right? All that stuff, sort of my influence in those areas that are way beyond like my job description, I would say, are all coming from my vast experience in the industry. And the experience is at a 35 attorney firm for 7 years and in Big Law with 3,000 plus attorneys across the globe, for a few years after that before I sort of settled back into the mid-sized firms again. So it also comes from, going back and forth in the industry where, a 3,000 attorney firm is totally different than a 35 attorney firm.
Yeah. As you look back at your career, was there a moment where you felt kind of outside of your depth? And what am I doing here? How did I get here? And what was that? And how did you get through it?
Sure. I mean, I think I was so young. Like I got right out of college and started working, right? Living downtown by myself. I mean, what was I doing that early? Kind of, I should have like gone and traveled the world first, right? I was so driven to do what I'd always wanted to do and figure it out that I just jumped right in. And I think what's interesting, and I give my husband credit right after Father's Day, maybe it's like fresh in my mind, but we were dating, and I remember I had been there for maybe at that point 5 years. And when I told my husband what I do all day, and he had just finished a master's in Europe, I mean, he was taking his time, let's just say that. And my husband said, "What are you doing with your life? Like, you have all these jobs, but I don't see you like mastering any of them. And also, do you like doing all of that stuff, right? Like, do you like everything that's on your plate? Like, isn't it kind of time to hone in on something, right?" And so that kind of got me thinking. And, realistically, I had to kind of at that point make a decision what I was going to do next, because the reality of it is I could have stayed at that firm forever. But I really would not have become a specialist or anything more advanced in any of the areas I was focused on. And there was a limitation at a firm that size of how much I could focus on one area versus all of them, and also start to excel and develop in those areas, right? And I knew that if I wanted to pick a lane and I wanted to get really good at that lane, I probably would have to go into big law, because that's where you kind of get sort of the opportunity to advance, and also the opportunity to have responsibilities beyond just the Chicago office, and maybe beyond just one practice area or a few practice areas with a small number of attorneys. So I kind of went on a listening tour. I met with all the contacts I had in the industry at that point. So that would be people in event planning and big publications like Cranes, or consultants that we had hired for recruiting or for marketing. And I just kind of talked to people to figure out what my next move would be, because there were a few options, right? I could have gone into consulting. I could have gone to a big firm. I could have gone to another smaller or mid-sized firm and had more of a generalist role like I had already. And I kind of had to like make a decision that was going to impact my career going forward. So I took it very seriously, and I took time. And sort of the conclusion was, what are you best at? Well, I was best at dealing with our clients, talking to our clients, managing our client relationships when it came to anything that was sticky or challenging, kind of being the backbone to the lawyers when they didn't want to have the tough conversations with their clients. I sort of was known for being able to do that even at a young age, and not alienating them or making them feel uncomfortable, like in the collections role, for example. So, that the moral of the story was, I think I want to go down the marketing BD in some way, shape, or form, right? Marketing, business development lane, which would include client events, would also include pitches and proposals and RFPs, would include helping the lawyers craft sort of their story, their mission statement, the why are we better than the other lawyers in the market, the why choose us, the why hire us, all of that. And that's what led me to sort of, apply to roles that were focused in that area at big firms, and land at Foley ultimately as my first, BD marketing focused role.
Sure, sure. You had mentioned your husband gave you some great advice and kind of pushed you in there. As you look back at your career, was there any other piece of advice that you received from a mentor or a boss or somebody that really still influences how you're making decisions today?
I had some amazing bosses over the years. I mean, I will say I also had bosses that I didn't think were amazing. And so I think the ones that were really fantastic stand out, and I still keep in touch with them today. I think, some of the best advice I've ever gotten is sort of, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who's gotten this advice, but just sort of the idea that you work hard, and you do sort of early in your career, you do what people ask you to do, right? That later in your career, you start to have a say in what you get to do, or at least you start to be a strategic partner. So it's not like the lawyers just tell you what to do and you execute. That's not really how my world works now, or hasn't for a while. But at the beginning of my career, I mean, I got the dry cleaning and the coffee, and I ran into courtrooms, and I grabbed papers, and I made copies. I mean, I did all the things. In college, when I was in legal studies, they gave us the opportunity to do stuff at the law school at Madison. And so I was able to connect with actual partners at law firms that volunteered their time. And I worked in their office during college, right? Like, I would wake up at 7 a.m. a Friday after God knows what night out, and like show up at the law firm and open it up at 7 a.m., right? So I was taught very early on, and I know it's also generational, but I was taught very early on to grind it out and sort of be the person that everyone can count on, and be the person that's extremely responsive. Like, I'm known for responding to emails in an ungodly amount of time, when it's late at night or early in the morning. Like, I'm just very responsive. I've always kind of counted on being that person that people can count on, right? And so I think the best advice I got was like, do the work and play hard when it comes to sort of the work hard, play hard mentality. Like, enjoy both. The hard work's going to pay off, and you will get noticed, right? You don't need to be the loudest person in the room necessarily, but you need to work the hardest to get noticed in this industry. And it might be things you really don't want to do and don't think have anything to do with with your career goals, because a lot of this industry is based on trust and personal relationships and sort of developing the relationship with the partners that just says we know we can count on her no matter what we give her. And so that is established by sort of doing all the things and being able to do them well and quickly, but also be able to not think anything was like above and beyond what I should be doing, right? And it's interesting. I think generationally that's changed. So
Hmm.
obviously I've seen that arc, and sometimes I feel old when I say like, what is this? Where's the hard work, right? Where's the attention to detail? Where's the we'll do anything to like, be noticed and move forward in our careers, right? It's like a very different mindset now. So I'm kind of honestly, I'm kind of happy that that's what I grew up in, because obviously that sets you apart and isn't necessarily the norm. Nowadays, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. No, as you were saying the same thoughts were going through my head about how generationally, I feel it is different. It is just different.
Yeah,
I grew up very much the same mentality that you had, and it's just different. I don't know if there's right or there's wrong, but it's
right.
different.
Somewhere in
So
the middle, I think, right?
yeah,
At the 3 a.m. pulling together tax returns for 6 weeks because I worked for, estate planning and tax partner. Like, could have done without some of that. But I was 20 something and my condo was down, the street. It's like I could handle it. But, it definitely instilled a certain level of work ethic that never leaves you, right? Like,
yeah,
once you do those things. And it wasn't honed in on just like your finals at college, right? This was like the real world, and you made a mistake, and there were real impacts to a client and real impacts to the bottom line. So the stakes were a lot higher.
yeah,
I think that was invaluable, both advice and expertise developed by that advice, that
yeah.
really, I think, have shaped sort of my whole journey.
Sure, sure. So when you first stepped into the CMO role at the firm, what did you feel had to be true very early on to you to earn that trust
Sure.
inside the firm?
So that's a great question. I was their first CMO. I don't think they planned to hire a CMO right away, right? I think it ended up working out based on just my resume landing on their desk. When I walked into the firm, the department was pretty small. It's still pretty small, but I had some longtime employees that were sort of taught that marketing just does whatever the lawyers tell them to do. So, I mean, I
Mhm.
alluded to that earlier, right? That's common. Um, Lawyers think they run the firm. Lawyers do run the firm, right? It's a partnership. It's a different model than most corporations. However, I was there to establish a department that wasn't viewed as an administrative task doer type department, right? It was viewed as we go to marketing and business development to help us sell ourselves essentially to clients, and they're the experts, right? Like that's what I had to sort of establish. And so that was a total turnaround, right? It was a turnaround from the perspective of the way the team felt and the way the team was positioned and the way the team was trained and developed to do their job and the way the lawyers looked at us. And so that was a big undertaking. Obviously, people are set in their ways, and the firm was at almost 40 years old at the point that I started there, and so that's a lot of years to sort of be set in your ways. So, I think what had to be true was having some partners in crime, as I call them. So certain partners that interviewed me and hired me and were in leadership roles where I had them as my backbone. I was also lucky enough to join the firm with our old CFO who retired since I joined. And he was also sort of my partner in crime, right? So the other C suite executive at the firm, I was the second. I could count on him to sort of be the backbone of my ideas. What do you think of this? Will they sort of take it? Where do I prioritize my time? What do I throw at them first, even though I have 17 things I want to accomplish? Here's my strategic plan, help me figure out who to go to for what, right? Like all those internal political considerations, I had to have some people that I could be pretty open, honest, and incredibly transparent about the long sort of goals and the bigger picture and the plan overall, and helping me figure out what to implement and institute sort of first, second, third, or low hanging fruit to sort of get buy-in and then move on, right? Those people were my sounding board. And, I had to have, a commitment and sort of an understanding from the team that this was going to take time, that they should stick with it, that something good is coming, right? That although it's going to be a lot of change, they're going to benefit as professionals and as leaders going forward, right? I had to sort of create an opportunity for them to have some growth and development, which again was a bit of an afterthought, right, at the firm for that department due to, I think, some lack of sort of leadership and direction. And so it was multi-pronged. It was a huge endeavor that had to be taken very sort of carefully and cautiously along the path I wanted to see. And I don't have a lot of patience. No, like my sort of internal clock is like 6 months, guys, let's get this going, right? But it was COVID too. I joined at a time where everyone was remote. And I remember saying to the managing partner and the head of the BD committee, guys, you're gonna have to give me some time. I usually I feel like I get up and running in 6 months when I've done this before, and it's in the middle of COVID, so I can't do these like group lunches and group meetings, and it's gonna be. And they're like, it's okay, we're in the same boat. Like all of us are trying to figure this out. So there was just this understanding walking in that I would get sort of this leeway and the time I needed, and that the only pressure really being put on me was on myself. So all of that sort of had to be part of the puzzle for me to be able to do what I needed to do and also feel supported and, understand that everyone sort of knew this was going to take time.
Yeah, yeah. As you look at your marketing mix today, when you think about the work that your team is doing, I'm sure there's events, attorney visibility, PR, thought leadership. Where are you seeing maybe some of the strongest returns right now?
I would say in our pitch and proposal process, um, our volume has gone up significantly. Interestingly enough, our volume's gone up kind of since AI came around. So I'm still kind of trying to assess where that's come from. And I've talked to a lot of other, folks in my industry about it. We're seeing more pitches and proposals come our way, opportunities to pitch and sort of RFPs come our way. We're obviously using AI and other technologies to make sure that our responses are timely. We can sort of turn them around quick. We can help the lawyers get in front of their clients or potential clients quickly by producing those, custom materials and responses and presentation materials too. A lot more in-person pitching, obviously post-COVID. It took a little while for people to start getting back in person. There was so much reliance on Zoom and Teams and all this. So people were pitching like this on the computer, right? And I think there's more of a return to in-person pitches and in-person custom trainings that our clients expect. Like come out to, our headquarters and bring your team of 6 or 7 and give us a custom training. That's happening more often. So that's where the lawyers are relying on us most heavily because they're obviously also trying to do their billable work, and all the work that goes into pitching and presenting and going out to see clients is non-billable, right? That's all sort of, part of doing business. So our ability to produce that content and at a level that's pretty close to final, at a level where their attention to sort of the detail and the editing is pretty minimal, is a huge, weight off their plate, and a huge efficiency factor because when clients want to pitch for a new matter, they want it now, right? RFPs, you get more time. There's a longer scope, but it's also a much bigger project to issue an RFP response. So all of that is where I see, we were just kind of, I was presenting to the equity partners recently, and I kind of had to look up our win rates, right? And they're way above industry standards and things like that. So that's kind of where I base our success from, that data. And obviously that's on all cylinders to the point where now we're looking at AI and saying, do we need to hire another person or can we like supplement our team even more with AI, right? Like where are we going to sort of spend that capital?
Sure, sure. And what would you say is maybe the hardest trade-off right now between investing your marketing resources into, say, like brand visibility to maybe bring in some more of those RFPs versus in those direct business development support items that you just mentioned for the attorneys?
So I think I'm very lucky to have a great team, and I think we split our time sort of with that in mind, right? Like I have obviously oversight into anything that leaves this firm under the firm brand name when it comes to the materials, the content, things like that. But I have a great team who takes on, the drafts of the pitches and the proposals and the presentations, and I am able to focus on the higher level considerations. So, I run our business development academy. That's a training program that we started with, and to your point with consultants, which we'll talk about soon, that's a training program where I realized we need to do this. We want to do this. I can't do it, right? I don't have the capacity to do it, even though I could probably do it myself. It just doesn't make sense. And it won't be what I want it to be and what I think would be effective for these partners at this firm, right? It's very much my approach to each firm is what would work here, not like what worked at every other firm I was at. It's very much a custom approach everywhere that I've been. And so I hired two consultants to come help me run this program. To your point, that program is focused on giving young up and coming partners. So we have a two-tier partnership, so income and equity, giving income partners that are either new to that title or have been in it in a little while and are working towards equity, giving them a set of skills and tools that make them feel confident, competent, supported, right? That the firm is actually leveraging the idea that, the investment upfront is worth it in our partners, right? We want them to get these skills. Whatever they do with those skills is up to them, right? But we're giving them sort of a very, equitable and sort of set basic skills in business development and marketing. And a lot of what we do in that program is build up their confidence, right? Tell them why they don't need to do everything under the sun. They could pick a few different things they like doing. And that business development marketing shouldn't be something they absolutely despise. There's ways to make it work for them and be interesting to them and be something that they enjoy doing, and not the like 15 cocktail parties a week is going to get you a client approach when they hate going to cocktail parties. So that's, a huge time investment that I make. I mean, yes, I have consultants running it, but I have to go to every session. I have to sort of really make sure that the lawyers show up to the sessions. There's a lot that goes into them graduating from that program. We do quarterly meetings with each partner that graduates from the program, and me and my team take that on. So that's a huge time investment, right? But that is like the investment in the pipeline. So, my view of marketing and business development is a 360-degree view. You have to be supporting and investing in every part of the sales pipeline to make sure that you have a balanced approach, right? It's the way that law firms also kind of function and run themselves. So we're lucky enough that, we can sort of ride the wave of the economy cycles in this country and abroad, because when our transactional practices are down because interest rates are high and money's not flowing, our litigation group kind of takes over because there's a lot more fighting between companies around bankruptcies, or what do you mean you're not closing that deal anymore? What do you mean you're coming out of that deal because you can't afford it? Like, it's cyclical. And so we're in a position where, when our transactional practices are sort of not producing as high, maybe our litigation practices are through the roof. And so that balances out the firm. It's the same thing with what we do, right? We want to make sure that when the lawyers aren't busy, they are busy figuring out where their next client is. And they can't just start thinking about where their next client is when they're not busy, right? They have to have people that are in the pipeline to go to when they're not busy. Especially in litigation practice where, you could have a case that's going on for 6 years. That case closes. You've spent all your time for 6 years on that case. Who's your next client, right? Like, that's even more paramount when you have litigation practice at the firm. So that's like a long way to say I'm constantly sort of evaluating where I should be spending my time. I'm constantly looking at my team and making sure that they can be self-sufficient to the point where, yes, we're small and we check in all the time and we're always together and we're always connected. I'm not like this sort of unengaged or sort of absent CMO, but I also need to make sure that the firm's getting the value out of my role and my title, which means I can't be in the weeds. And it's a constant battle, right? To try to, manage a team that's more junior and also make sure that I'm managing up towards the lawyers and the partners. But that's sort of, what I'm here for, essentially.
Yeah. So as you think about, the changing landscape that you're in and the role that you're playing right now, if you could bring together a small group of really smart marketers for an off-the-record discussion, like, what's the one topic that you'd want that room to help you think through right now?
I mean, I'm sure it's like ding, ding, ding obvious, right? But how AI is going to change our industry. There's two factors to that. There's how is AI going to change the practice of law, going back to earlier in my career, right? Like, what makes lawyers tick, how a law firm makes money, how it works, sort of start to finish, right? And then it's, what is the expectation going to be, or what are the implications going to be to the management teams, right? To the teams that are running departments at the firm, to HR, to marketing, to recruiting, to training, to our COO's role, who's kind of running operations for the firm. how is AI going to impact all of our jobs, all of our departments? Because ultimately, we all know, and we've always known, right? Every one of our departments is overhead at a law firm. Real estate is overhead at a law firm. So anything that is dollars out the door for the firm to pay us to run our departments, to pay for our real estate, right? That's money out of partners' pockets. So it's a two-pronged challenge because if our, lawyers are expected to charge less or make less or, really show that, the AI money that's spent on the tools and the developers and other things that are building that infrastructure don't get passed to the clients, right? Those are all dollars out of the pockets of the lawyers, and therefore that trickles down to everyone, right? So I think the biggest topic you hear when you get marketers together is, how does it impact our pitches, proposals, our value proposition to clients, our positioning in the marketplace, right? That's the business of law side. And therefore, that is going to impact also then what do we have to do to change our operations as a team? And obviously every department's going through that to then, make that gap less broad, right? To sort of make up for the dollars lost potentially, or make up for the efficiencies gained, which means potentially less hours billed to a client, right? Those are all considerations. I honestly, a lot of people are like doom and gloom and dread and all this stuff about it. I'm like the opposite. And the reason is I'm used to having a small team, right? I've always had a smaller team than I should for the number of attorneys that we have. We've always prided on being like extremely responsive and efficient. So now it's kind of fun to potentially have like AI help us, right? And again, be able to say like, I don't need another, to hire someone. I might and I might not, but like, let's see what we can do. Our firm recently hired 3 software developers to come in house and just build stuff out for us. And one of those people is going to be focused on the operations and not necessarily the business of law side to help us build tools internally with AI to kind of connect our systems in a way that will make us more efficient as a team and between all the teams trying to work together, right? Because a lot of our systems are sort of like I have my systems and HR has their systems and finance has their systems, but they might not all talk to each other. And I think that's where, we're excited to have the opportunity to work with those folks. And I think that's ahead of the game, right? I think a lot of firms are counting on the big law firms to sort of figure it out first. And then, the other firms will kind of jump on eventually. We're of the mindset that if you're not using AI in the practice of law at the moment, you're way behind and it's not going anywhere. So you might as well not wait. So that's
Yeah.
kind of a fun place to be, where our leadership really gets it and isn't sort of on their heels waiting for someone else to figure it out. And we get to be a part of, building, developing, growing, a part of what that's going to look like for the firm and for us versus being told, here's what you have to do with AI.
Sure, sure. Yeah, it sounds super exciting. I know there seems to be those two sides, people that are super excited about it, some that are really down about it and nervous and scared,
Yeah.
about it. And
Yeah.
I
Change is
personally,
hard. Change is hard.
it is, it is. I come, I think, from more of a mentality similar to how your firm is aligning itself.
Yeah.
So we'll have to have you back on in a year or so and hear how all that's come about.
Right,
So
exactly. When I'm like a robot and I can just
sure.
respond to your questions with a bot, that would be
Yeah.
kind of interesting.
There you go. There you go. So we've talked a lot about work. I would like to kind of close things out with asking more of a personal side.
Oh, sure.
So outside of work, I'd love to know, what energizes you, what helps you reset when you got to get away from all the chaos that is of running the marketing at a law firm.
Sure, sure. So, I have 2 little kids, so I'm sort of in the thick of being a mom and a wife and, parent, it feels like is a 24/7 job more than the job, right? But, we definitely enjoy Chicago in the summer. I always say like we have 3 months and it's not even 3 months these days of like good weather. So traveling sort of my ability to get away. My husband and I recently went to Mexico for a few days before sort of the end of the school year. I'm still debating whether that was a good idea or not because we got back to absolute chaos. But we had the 4 days away, tried to disconnect, not great about not checking my emails, but I did my best. And I get recharged by those small things, right? Like a few days away will recharge me, or like, a good workout or a good walk or, a dinner with a friend, right? I'm the kind of person that needs those small bites versus like 2 weeks away. I'm not very good at taking 2 weeks away. I'm also the kind of person that once I'm on vacation for a week, if it's like too relaxing, I'm like, all right, get me back to like chaos. Like I thrive in chaos. So it's kind of funny. We have like a family joke that like, oh, she can't relax for too long. Like she's going to start, wanting to do something. So yeah, so I would say, enjoying the weather, enjoying my kids, my family, having those like small breaks to kind of enjoy life outside of work. And then, really jump right back into it on Monday is usually my mentality.
Yeah, yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I don't know that I've taken even a week vacation and I don't know how long. And I think I'm the same mentality as you, but then I'm like, maybe I need to just do it, and maybe I
I
will.
I know. I don't know what it's
Maybe I'll have a different point
like.
of view. I don't know.
I'm amazed at like anyone that can take more than a week off and even that much when they're not retired. Like I'm like, wait, how? Like how much do you check your email? It's just I literally like thrive in chaos is like what I say on a regular basis because I actually think that's what when I'm at my best is when there's 17 things to juggle and I like have a long list and I have to kind of check the things off the list. That's when I feel the most accomplished.
Sure.
But yeah, it's not always the healthiest approach to work-life balance or any sort of, legitimate like downtime.
Yeah.
I've been reading more books. I've committed to this idea that I'm going to actually read books start to finish. I have a lot of books I start but don't finish. That's
Okay.
sort of my MO. And so I think this summer, I've been trying to get through books, which I'll let you know again in a year whether that happened. I think I have one that I'm almost done with, and I'm like, oh my God, I may actually finish a book and not have like the bookmark in the middle of it by the end of the summer. So we'll see how that goes.
There you go. Well, we have to report back on that certainly as well.
Yeah.
So, Sivan, this has been amazing. I want to thank you for the
Thank
conversation,
you.
the insights. To everybody watching at home, don't forget to follow CMO Journeys for more conversations with the marketing leaders that are shaping what's next. I'm Christian Banach. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.